Hey friends, I'm LlamaMamaKayla and I want to welcome you to my channel. If you're new here, I appreciate you stopping by for a visit with us, and of course I appreciate all my regular subscriber friends for clicking on my video to watch today. I appreciate you all so much. So today's video is a little different. It's a special week and you're probably not aware of what this week is. Because you probably don't have a reason to be aware of this week. Today is Monday, February the 7th, and February the 7th through the 11th, 2022 is Feeding Tube Awareness Week. Now, my family has participated in this Awareness Week for many, many, many years. This has always been a week that we have celebrated. It's always an early week in February, usually the first or second week, whatever's a full week in February, is Feeding Tube Awareness Week every year. It has been for a very, very long time, and like I said, this is a very dear subject to our family because we have dealt with this for many, many years. So this week I'm doing videos about, I'll probably do other videos too, but I am doing some videos about feeding tube awareness because I want to bring awareness to this feeding tube. I know lots of people have questions, and if I can answer questions, that's great. So this week I'm going to be, talking about different topics. Like each day I'm going to have a different topic that I talk about referring to Feeding Tube Awareness Week. It's a lot to say, isn't it? Okay, so one of the reasons why we've celebrated this week, not really celebrated, but participated in the Awareness Week, is because our son Elijah had a feeding tube until he was 16 years old. And if you've been around, you know that last year on February the 10th, I got a feeding tube. So yeah, feeding tubes have been part of our lives for a very long time. And so you would think like I'd be a pro at this, but I'm not. I have issues. So anyway, so I'm going to tell you a little bit about why Elijah had a feeding tube and why I have a feeding tube, and then we're going to talk about some just some facts about feeding tubes and some information and stuff. So our son Elijah, he is now 22 years old. He was born with eosinophilic gastroenteritis, and we did not know what was wrong with him. And he was sick baby. He was just so very sick, and I would take him to the doctor like every week, sometimes more than once a week. I mean, the baby was sick, okay? And so the pediatrician said, well, he has colic. And, he's just going to be like this until he's about 3 months old. I was counting down them days till 3 months till my baby got better, okay? And so I just kept going to the doctor, and that's what they kept saying every time. When I went to this certain pediatrician clinic, it was all lady doctors that worked there, and we had one particular doctor that we did see, the one that saw him when he was born in the hospital. But sometimes if she was busy or I would make like an emergency visit, we would just see whoever was available. And they would all say he was colic and he would get better. Okay, so when he was 3 months old, I went to the doctor and I'm like, okay, he's 3 months old. He's still screaming. This baby screamed 12, 14 hours straight. He didn't sleep. He would doze off 10 minutes at the most and then just scream. And so not only was I going crazy, I was really worried about, his brain development because, you need sleep. He needs sleep to develop and, all that kind of stuff. So I was just as worried about his brain development as I was his throwing up and diarrhea. Bloody diarrhea, and throwing up, like projectile, profusely throwing up, covering a whole room. It was just, crazy. So I was worried about both spectrums, you know, his development, brain development from not getting any sleep, and the digestive and all that kind of stuff too. So I ended up going to my doctor when, after he was 3 months old and we just didn't get anywhere, I went to my doctor and I was just like, I took Elijah with me, and my doctor had been with me for about 10 years or so. So he knew me, he knew Jody. He was also Jody's dad's doctor when he was alive, and so, you know, he knew us. We were friends. So I went to my doctor and I was just like, give him something to help him or give me something to help me. And I told him everything that had been going on, and he was just like, well, let's get him in to see a gastro doctor. And I was just like, oh, really? We can do that? And so he set us up. I mean, he made an appointment right then and got us in to see a gastroenterologist in about 2.5 hours away from where we live. So we went and saw this doctor, and we had some future appointments with him, and then we went to have him scoped and a pH probe placed in his throat that measured, like, I think reflux and acid and stuff like that. So we went into the hospital. We went to the hospital to have this procedure done, and it was a 1-day, you know, outpatient thing. And when the doctor did the scope and all, and he came out, he said, I found some stuff, and I can't let him go home. He can't leave the hospital. He's got to stay. And we were just like devastated. I mean, that was scary. You know, we didn't have a clue what was going on. And he was throwing out these big words like eosinophilic, and, you know, I'm like, I don't know what that is. And he's just throwing out all these big words and such, and he did biopsies and all this, and he said, we have to get the biopsies back and find out what's going on with this baby. And I was like, I agree, but, you know, I'm just in shock or whatever. So Jody and Dakota was able to come home, but Elijah and I had to stay in the hospital. And they put him on this special formula that the doctor called liquid gold. And so he was placed on this formula. It was horrible. It tasted horrible. It smelled like vomit. I mean, baby formula does not smell good, but this baby formula was horrible. And it was very expensive. It was $40 a can. And, yeah, he drank a can of it a day. It was $40 a day. And it was crazy. So anyway, the biopsies came back, and we found out what it was and everything. So the doctor said, you know, I've read about this, but I've never treated a patient with eosinophilic gastroenteritis. And so I was like, okay, so what do we do? And so we saw him for a little bit, and he just wasn't, he didn't know how to treat him. He didn't know what to do. He could just only, you know, things he had read about, and, well, we can try this, we can try that. So anyway, we ended up going from doctors all over from, we live in Louisiana. We went from Texas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, Arkansas, and we finally ended up in Cincinnati, Ohio, at a gastro doctor there at the Children's Hospital, and that's where he got help. That's where the doctor at the time, way back, you know, 22 years ago, where the doctor was treating patients, actively treating patients. He had a large number of patients with eosinophilic gastroenteritis. So anyway, he explained that, you know, Elijah, you can't feed him food, you can't feed him normal formula and stuff. He had to have the liquid gold, and he had to have a feeding tube placed to get enough liquid gold in him, because he couldn't physically drink that much. And like I said, it tasted horrible. I mean, I guess it tasted horrible. I didn't taste it. He acted like it tasted horrible. I knew it smelled horrible. So anyway, Elijah ended up with a feeding tube. You know, surgically tube placed into his stomach. And so he had that until he was 16 years old. And he had gotten over the years where he could eat rice and apple and trying to think. We did rice and apple like for just years. You know, he could eat some plain white rice and some apple, and then we'd try to add in other foods, and you know, it wouldn't work. But and then whenever as he got a teenager, he was just trying other foods on his own, and he finally found some foods that he could eat and he was happy with and everything, and so he decided to take his feeding tube out. He still threw up a lot. He still had diarrhea a lot. He don't want me to tell that part. But anyway, he still has some issues today, but he doesn't have a feeding tube anymore. He took it out, and that was his choice. And I'm glad he did that while he's, you know, was under 18, and we could guide him and have a little bit of say in what was going on and everything. But because, you know, he could have turned 18 and left home and, you know, done things without us having an input or something, you know. He still lives at home. But anyway, you know, it was his choice, so he did it, and he's doing okay. Like I said, he still has some sickness at times, but he knows what he can't eat. Like, he knows different things and such, and so he tries to avoid things that he knows is going to make him throw up or whatever. But anyway, he's doing pretty good. So that's Elijah's story. Now, I have a feeding tube because Scleroderma hardened my esophagus, and it does not work for me to swallow food. When I eat, it gets stuck right in here, and it is so very painful, and it won't go down. I can't get it up. I mean, it's just horrible pain. It's so much pain, and I do end up throwing up, and so that's been going on for a while. I had my esophagus stretched several times, and it would last for a little while, and then it would, you know, just get hard to swallow again. And then I had an episode where I was having some testing done already, had some scheduled out, and I had an episode where I couldn't even swallow water. Water would get stuck, and so that was scary. And so I was like that for an afternoon, a night. The next morning I got up and I thought, okay, it's going to be relaxed and I'll be able to. And I drank water and just started throwing up. And I was like, what in the world? And so I told my husband, I said, I gotta go to the ER. I mean, I can't not get water down, you know. So we went to the ER, and of course I was admitted because, you know, they're going to send somebody home that can't even get water down. And some more testing was done there, and then they got me on Boost drinks, and so that was my new food. And so then I got out of the hospital, and I had appointments in Shreveport to have some more tests done on my esophagus. And so I went over and had those done, and then I'd go back to my doctor's appointment. And I was, at that time, I think I was even seeing the surgery team, trying to figure out what they were going to do, because just stretching my esophagus wouldn't help. And so, anyway, the gastro doctor in Shreveport, Louisiana, he was able, from this test where they put this ultrasound down in you, you know, and you have to drink this nasty stuff, and he was able to see through the ultrasound and all that my esophagus did not work at all. Most people's esophagus like contracts as you swallow. Mine did nothing. It was just like hardened, like a PVC pipe. And so he talked to my doctor, and I went back and saw the surgery team, and they said, your esophagus doesn't work. And I was like, okay, what are we going to do? And they're like, we're not sure yet. We need to talk with your doctors. And so I was like, okay, you know, like, I'm trying to eat and throwing up every day. Basically, I was just eating ice cream. I ate a lot of ice cream. And so I went to my doctor, and he told me, And while I was there, he actually talked to the gastro doctor on the phone while I was there in the room. They talked and discussed it, and he told me that my esophagus didn't work, and I had two choices. I could, and I don't even know why this was a choice, because then he explained that it wouldn't be any better. He said I could have my esophagus removed and my small intestine pulled up and attached, but that didn't contract either, but it wouldn't be as hard as a PVC pipe, so if baby food could get down, maybe it couldn't. He didn't really know. Or I could get a feeding tube. And then he said, I suggest you get a feeding tube because the other surgery, removing the esophagus and all that, is very, very hard on the person, and you have a lot of health issues already, and you don't need that. It would be a hard recovery for you. So after, talking about it with Jody and giving it some thought, we decided to go with a feeding tube. And so that was set up, and I ended up getting a feeding tube. Well, guess what? That wasn't easy either. I had a lot of troubles. Like, my body kept rejecting it. And I was in the hospital a lot last year, and just a lot of things happened. I won't go into all the details of that, but it was a long time before I had a feeding tube that stayed in my body and actually worked. So anyway, people can have feeding tubes for lots of different reasons. It could be, a swallowing issue. It could be digestive. It could be just, they need weight gain, or just, I don't know. There's lots of different reasons why people could have feeding tubes. I think feeding tube awareness is important, mainly for kids, some adults too, but as Elijah was a kid growing up, he would have on his little backpack with his tube running down and connecting to his backpack. I know you can't see. It would just run down and hook up, and the backpack made a little noise as it put food into his stomach. And, kids were curious, and adults were curious too. Sometimes kids would be mean and cruel about it. Mostly kids were curious. And that's fine, it was an opportunity to educate people or whatever. When Elijah was little, I had a book. I still have the book, but it's in storage. I had a book about feeding tubes, and I had a little plushie of a stomach, and then we also had a Build-A-Bear dog that we placed a feeding tube in, and then I had a feeding tube with the syringes and stuff, and I had all this in a bag together, and we would. My kids were homeschooled. We would take it to our homeschool classes once in a while, and we would do, a presentation about feeding tubes and just trying to educate children about it, and, let them, so they would understand what a feeding tube was and such. And so we would do that sometimes for Feeding Tube Awareness Week and help people understand. A lot of adults don't understand feeding tubes, or why someone would have it, or things like that. But honestly, nearly 450,000 Americans have feeding tubes. Now, some might be like a NG tube that goes up your nose. It goes up, you tape it on the side of your face, and it goes up your nose and down into your throat and down into your stomach. And then you have a little pump that hooks to your the other end of that hose, which is really long. And it, puts food into your stomach. And then some people have it surgically placed in their stomach, like I do and like Elijah did. So, people can live with feeding tubes. It doesn't mean that, you're not going to live long, or, you're going to die or anything. Feeding tube is just a way of getting nutrition into your body when you can't eat it. So now I can't eat some things, like I can eat ice cream, mashed potatoes, grits, I'm trying to think, lots of soft things like that just go down. Meat, I can't eat meat, like steak or hamburger. Oh, I would love a hamburger. I crave a hamburger. And when I'm in town and I smell a hamburger place, I'm just like, oh, I want a hamburger. And pizza, I want pizza. It's been so long since I've had a hamburger or pizza. I hadn't had either one of those in like probably nearly 2 years. So anyway, it's you know, not a death sentence to get a feeding tube is what I'm trying to say. Is a feeding tube painful? Well, right after surgery, it is very, very painful. Like, right after surgery, you feel like you've just been gutted. I mean, it's bad. But, of course, each day it gets a little better and eases up. But when you have surgery after like I did, you barely recover from the other surgery and you're having surgery again. That was not good. But today, on my feeding tube, is it painful? Well, it can be at times. It's uncomfortable most of the time, and then sometimes it's painful. I have to think about, like, reaching to get something. Like, yeah, my arm reaches to get it, but it also pulls my stomach, like, you know, like stretching. It pulls on my stomach, and it hurts. It's uncomfortable and at times, you know, painful. To climb up in the truck, which is high off the ground, is painful. In the bed, rolling over or finding a position that's comfortable and doesn't hurt is difficult at times. And you know, there's just things I have to think about whenever that I used to not think about. When you have a feeding tube, you have to think about these things. I can't lift anything heavy because it does hurt. Like in my feeding tube, it kind of feels like it's going to pop out or something if I strain or lift something heavy or whatever. But, you know, I'm doing okay with it. I am doing okay. It's just, you know, there's issues that come with it. There's issues with everything. But, you know, I don't really try to dwell on that. I just keep going, and it is what it is, and it's part of my life, and I just deal with it. So, anyway, this video is already over 20 minutes, and I, you know, wanted to keep these little short videos about Eosinophilic Awareness Week this week. I wanted to keep the video short, but I already went 20 minutes. So, anyway, come back later all week long, and I'm going to have different topics and tell you different things about Feeding Tube Awareness Week, issues that you probably have no idea about, and there's things going on. And I appreciate you all for stopping by for this visit, and I will see you all again tomorrow. Thanks, friends.